Okay, it's 11 o'clock. Let's get started. Hey, everybody, welcome to nTop Live. My name is Andrew Reitz. I'm a product engineer at nTopology, and today I'm going to teach you how to apply functional and dynamic and visually appealing textures to consumer goods, specifically a phone case. And you can see these two examples up on my screen. We're going to learn how to make both of them today, and it's actually really easy using nTop platform. So I'm going to show you how to apply textures. I'm going to show you how to vary textures. I'm going to show you how to mix textures, and I'm also going to show you how to stack and layer textures on top of each other. And so before we get started, one thing you might be asking is like, why should I apply a texture to a consumer good? A lot of consumer goods are handheld. Sometimes the texture would provide a like a grip function, and you need grip in areas of higher amounts of pressure. And also you need to have the texture look visually appealing because it is a consumer good. It needs to be desirable and people need to purchase it. So yeah, we're going to cover how to do that. So before we step into the phone case example, I'm going to jump over to this file. And at first, we're going to just look at some basic texturing functionality we have in the program. And I always like to start with kind of like a blank slate, something out of context, kind of like a sandbox to experiment in. Just so I'm kind of like free and I'm not bounded by the restraints of the actual product. And so I have this, what I'm calling a design swatch. And over to my left here, I have a whole series of textures that are that come with nTop platform that you can find in the architected materials toolkit. So each one of these is a single block that outputs a texture, and they're very easy to use. Just one block. You add your target object, and what this will do is instantly apply a texture to that object. So we have surface roughness, which assigns this like organic random noise to an object. We have Voronoi emboss. These are just some of my favorite. I'm not going to cover all of them, but Voronoi emboss applies like a Voronoi like type ribbing pattern and adds material. We have the opposite, which is Voronoi deboss, which subtracts the Voronoi pattern from the swatch. We have subtractive lattice texturing. This is one of my favorite ones. This takes, it lattices are 3D. This basically takes the top plan view of a lattice, flattens it, and then subtracts it from that object. And it creates a really nice tile pattern. And we're going to look at that in the context of the phone case today. And then we have the triangle wave. This is one of my favorite ones. And although this is fairly normal, nothing too exciting, very quickly, using some modifiers that we'll learn about, we can turn this into something really, really crazy, like throwing a stone into a pond. And so one of my favorite textures is actually the sphere grid deboss. I'm just gonna drag and drop my design swatch into there. And also I'm going to drag and drop my texture face, the face of the CAD object that I want to texture. And so you might be asking, why is this my favorite block? This is not that exciting. Well, first I'm going to go ahead and just increase the U and V count. So already this is, in my opinion, this is really impressive. I just subtracted 1,600 spheres from the swatch without fail. So already that's pretty awesome that you can instantly add a texture to an object that has an incredible amount of density, not worry about this operation failing. So yeah, this is the sphere grid deboss. I'm just going to call this, I'm going to add a little note here and call this my constant texture. But what I want to do is I want to take this to the next level. I want to make this a bit more visually appealing. I want to vary the sphere radius. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse this block. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to change my note here to variable texture just to indicate my intent. All right, so if we look at this block, you notice the sphere radius, it's a constant value. But if you notice to the left of the name, there's this icon, and this is called a scalar field. This basically means that I can import a whole field of values, and all the values can be different. So what I'm going to teach you is how to take and assign a unique value to all 1,600 spheres that are being subtracted from this swatch. So I'm going to come up to the search bar here, and I'm going to type in point variable. And the point variable is going to let me place a point on the swatch. I'm going to do 005. And so I basically placed a point directly at the center of this swatch here, and I'm going to call this point 1. So ultimately what I want to do is set up some logic where I say, if you're a sphere, and you're directly on top of this point, or you're near this point, I want you to be pretty large. And then as you move away from this point and come close to the edge, I want you to basically fade and dissipate and not have a radius at all. So to do that, to set up that logic, I'm going to go to the search bar and I'm going to type in ramp. And the ramp block is what's going to allow me to set up this logic. And it looks a little intimidating, but it's very easy to use. So I'm going to just drag and drop my point. So this is the object that I want to use as like my modifier. And then what I want to do is to say, okay, like if you're on top of this point, so, or if you're near this point, so 0 millimeter, I want the sphere radius to be 1 millimeter, 1 millimeter. And then I'm going to go back here and say, okay, as you move away, and I know my swatch is about 100 millimeters. So let's say at 50, I want your radius value to be nothing. And then I'm just going to select the first option here, which is a linear fall off. I'm going to turn off the visibility of my ramp. And then what I can do is just simply drag and drop this ramp. You'll notice that the ramp has the same icon as the sphere radius. So I can just simply drag and drop this ramp into the sphere radius. And I've created a variable texture. So now the spheres that are close to this point are much larger, and as they approach the edge of this swatch, they don't have a radius at all. And so yeah, I'm going to increase this a little bit. I'm going to say, let's say 1.5 millimeters. All right, that already looks a lot better. And then I can modify this a bit more. So one, I could invert this condition. I could just say, let's make this 0 and let's make this 1.5. So now the spheres have no radius the closer they are to this point, and they become much larger as they drift towards. They become 1.5 millimeters as they drift towards this edge. So I'm going to switch this back. I like the way that was looking before. And you can also like fine tune this a little bit more. I could say anywhere from 0 to 10 millimeter, I want to guarantee that I have a radius of 1.5. So I could increase this to 10. So basically between 10 and 0 or anything less than that, I have a guaranteed 1.5 millimeter. Anything 50 and beyond guaranteed will be 0. Okay, cool. So let's take this to the next level. What can we do to make this even more dynamic? One, like you could have multiple modifiers. So I'm going to collapse this sphere grid. I'm going to call this one modifier. I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to rename this multiple modifier. And so what I want to do is I'm going to just take this point variable here. I'm going to duplicate it 4 times. So I'm just going to go in, just quickly rename them, 0.3, 0.4, and we'll do 0.5. Cool. I like the point variable too because it's really easy. I can just click the point and I can very easily just drag it. I'm just going to eyeball it for this example, but I'm going to drag each one of these points over to the corner here. Cool. Okay, great. So I have these 5 points, and if I expand my block here for the multiple point modifier, basically what I want to do is go in here. I want to get rid of this 1 point. I want to add all 5 points at once. So how do I do that? And there's a couple ways to do this, but in this example, I'm going to show you how to do a Boolean Union. So if we add a Boolean Union block, I can expand the number of inputs, and I can just simply add all 5 points together. So I've joined all my points. I'll turn this into a variable. I'll call this my joined points. What I can do is just simply swap out that 0.1 with all my joined points, turn off my one modifier, and you can see that now we have all 5 points and we have the spheres responding to all of those. So as they approach each point, the sphere radius gets larger, and as they drift away, they get smaller. So I'm going to fine tune this just a little bit more. Maybe I'll make this 40. And again, I could very easily go in and invert this condition, make that 0, make this 1.5. Okay, cool. All right, so let's jump over to the phone case. So yeah, in this example, we learned how to apply texture, and we learned how to modify the look of the texture or property of the texture using some point modifiers. So now I'm going to jump over to a file I have for the phone case. And now we're going to learn how to mix some textures and keep building on our knowledge here. So I have this phone case, and I have the face of the phone case that I want to texture. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the subtractive lattice block to subtract from our phone case. And so I had to make a slight modification to the subtractive lattice texture. So I'll provide this file. Basically, I had to ensure that the depth was a scalar field. And again, I'll provide these files at the end of the nTop Live. So basically, let's just start first by making a constant texture. And so I can take our phone case here, just drag and drop that in. I have the face that I want to texture. I'll drag that in here as well. I'm going to select the first lattice type, and I'm just going to select the depth. So let's see what we get here. I'm going to turn off my inputs. Okay, so obviously we have some work to do. It's not that exciting at the moment. The depth is way too shallow, and it looks like the grid is pretty sparse. Nothing too exciting. So let's focus on the depth first. I'm going to increase this to 0.5. That's a perfect depth. I think that's awesome. But I want to start to increase the density. These are rectangular. I want them to be more square-like. Let's see what we get. Let me increase some of these. All right, we're getting better. I'll increase this to 30. And I'll increase this to 0.5 or to 15. Okay, cool. All right, so this looks really good. I really like the depth of the texture that we're subtracting from this phone case. I like the density of the texture as well. But what I don't like is that the texture just suddenly abruptly terminates around such like a critical point or feature of the phone case. So I want to set up some logic that we used in the last example file to taper the depth based on proximity to this camera edge. And I also want the texture to taper as it approaches the edge of this camera case as well. So this is my constant texture. So what I'll do is I'll come in here. Let's duplicate this. I'm going to call this my variable texture. And so if we expand this block, we can see that the depth is a scalar field. And in the last example, we used a point to vary the sphere radius in that example. In this case, I want to use some features of the phone case to vary the depth of the lattice. And so in this file, I set up this very simple, like these massings. They're a little bit exaggerated, but basically they represent the camera and the space beyond the camera case. So as you approach this camera and as you approach the edge, we want that depth to taper. So I can use this texture modifier as a piece of geometry. And what we'll need is a ramp block. Bring this down here. So I'm going to use my texture modifier, bring that in. And we want to set up some sort of logic. So we can use, this is a new feature we recently added called the UI ruler. And so I can come in here and measure. So let's say we have the camera edge, which is at 0, and then I can say like at about 10 is where I want the texture to transition up to 0.5 millimeter. So I can say if you're at 0, so if you're at the edge of the camera or the edge of the case, why don't we make the depth 0 millimeter? And then I'll go back and say, okay, when you're at 10 millimeter away from the camera or 10 millimeter away from the edge, I want the depth to be 0.5 millimeter. I'm going to turn off the ramp. And then I'm also going to select a continuity, which is linear. And so I can just simply swap out that constant value for this scalar field. Awesome. Yeah, that looks really good. So let's modify this a little bit further. So now we see that the texture is fading as it approaches the edge. What I want to change though is that I know that immediately as we move away from the camera, this starts to transition. So maybe I just want to guarantee that, you know, for 2 millimeters around the camera and 2 millimeters from the edge, we're going to have 0 thickness. And so what's awesome about this is, one, already this looks like really good, but what I can do is I can go in and I can just very easily and quickly swap out the type of lattice. So body-centered cubic, face-centered cubic. There's some really crazy patterns in here that you can achieve. Let's give you an example. This one's one of my favorite. And then, let's see, some honeycomb patterns. So I'm going to switch back to simple cubic. Cool. So I have this texture, and what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to get rid of the note here, and I'm going to turn these both into variables. I'm going to call this texture A. Texture. And for texture B, I'm going to switch this to a different texture. I'm going to switch this to face centered cubic. Put that render. Cool. So I have these two textures here, right? And ultimately, what I want to do is, let's say you want the texture to morph as it approaches a feature. So in this case, the camera lens and the edge. And so what I can do is I can set up a logic where I can actually blend the textures, but I can have them blend in specific regions. I can control where that blending occurs. So I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to go up to the search bar and I'm going to type in mix. Mix is a really powerful tool that allows me to basically blend these two textures seamlessly. I don't have to worry about geometry intersecting or any failures. It'll take care of it. And so the way this works, if I turn this off, it's asking for a factor, so a value between 0 and 1. So I can type in 0. If I type in 0, I'm only going to get texture A. If I type in 1, I'm only going to get texture B. And then if I type in 0.5, I'm going to get a little bit of texture A, half of texture A, and half of texture B. But you'll notice that this is awesome to begin with because I can seamlessly blend these textures together to create new textures. But what I'd like to do is have this blending occur in specific regions. I want to control where that blending happens because I like qualities of both textures independently. And so if we look at the factor input, we can see that this is a scalar field. So I know that I can input a ramp, a field of values that represent a factor. So I'm going to go up to the search bar. I'm going to type in ramp. And what I'm going to use to ramp is a plane from normal. I'm going to type in plane from normal. And this is going to give me a plane here. And I can just use the widget and just drag it to the base of my texture. And so basically I can set up a logic that says, like, if you're at the 0 of that plane that we have here, I want you to be texture A. And as you move up towards the camera, I want you to be texture B. So if you're at 0, if you're at the end of the camera is 150, approximately 150 millimeters, I can say you're going to be texture 0. That's a factor, so we don't need to apply any units. And then the out is going to be texture B. And I'll select the linear fall off, turn off my ramp, and I can just simply drag and drop this ramp into the factor input. Nice. This is looking really good. Yeah, so we can see that at the bottom here, we have texture A. And then as we gradually move up towards the camera, we get texture B. And again, I want to control this a little bit more. Like, I just want this region to be purely texture A. So I can modify the ramp function to say, hey, this transition to start maybe 20 millimeters away from the plane. So I know that between 0 and 20 is going to be texture A. And let's say between 130 and 150, or anything beyond 130, we're going to have texture B. Whew, that is nice. And so, yeah, if I zoom in here, you can just like see the transitions. Like, it's very quickly, you can start to see like this subtle transition between the properties and features of texture B. And of course, I'm in medium resolution. If I jump over here to high resolution, you can see this transition. It's really, really crisp. It's really clean. And so, I mean, that's amazing. You don't have to worry about intersection. You're kind of just freely able to blend and mix different geometry types together. I'm going to jump back over to here. And what's great about this is that I can make some big moves after this. Like, I've already blended my textures. I set up the logic where the blending occurs. You can very easily just go in and say, okay, like, I like texture B, but I want to experiment with different types of textures here. Maybe we'll see what a honeycomb pattern looks like. Ooh, that's good. So, I mean, I could spend all day experimenting and exploring different texture types. But what's awesome about this is that it affords you the opportunity to, I think, like create unique textures that you couldn't, one, you couldn't create by hand. And I'm not quite sure how you model this in any other fashion. So, I mean, the mixing block is like super powerful. Okay. Yeah, so that's the one example. And so the last thing I want to show you before we run out of time is how to basically stack some layers. So we're going to look at the triangle wave. So I'm going to come up here to texturing. I'm going to go to the triangle wave texture, and I'm going to turn off my previous example. And so what I want to do is just take my phone case that I have here, and I just want to apply a triangle wave across this. Okay, so we have this wave that's being applied to the entire body. But I can use my texture modifier. And if we look at the wave height, it's a scalar field input. I can use that same texture modifier in the previous phone case example to taper the height. So I'm going to add, again, I'm going to add another ramp block here. Bring this down. I'm going to add a note here, just kind of separate out my work. I'm going to call this triangle wave texture. So I'm going to use this texture modifier, and I'm going to use the same logic that we had before. So anywhere from 0 to 10 millimeters, I want my wave height to be 0 millimeter, units, and I want the wave height to be, let's say, 0.5 millimeters. And select the linear fall off, close, turn off that visibility. So I can just drag and drop that ramp into the wave height. Let's see what this does. Nice. Yeah, so this, yeah, so we can see that the wave height tapers to 0 as it approaches the camera and as it approaches the edge. And it's at 0.5 millimeter here. This is looking pretty good. And I can come in here and I can modify the direction of this as well. If I wanted it to be on like a 45, I could type in 0.5 here for the direction. Nice. And so what's awesome about this last thing I'm going to show you is I can just I can take this triangle wave, I can duplicate it. I'm going to get rid of my note here. I could just come in and I could just make that 45, just make that value negative. And so we could get a triangle wave going in the opposite direction. I'm going to increase my wave spacing here and make this a variable. I'm going to make this 2. And I'm going to assign that variable to both wave. Cool. This looks really good. All right, so we've intersected these two waves. This is creating like this scallop condition in this area. So what I'm going to do is there's a couple things we could do. I'm going to show you two techniques. One, the easiest thing to do is I could just do a Boolean Union. I could add a Boolean Union block to my notebook, and I could just take triangle wave 1, triangle wave 2, and it'll just merge those two into one solid object. And now this is one object with this like scallop condition. And so I'm going to actually take these out of Boolean Union. So the other option you could do, get rid of Boolean Union, is I could easily just mix, or not mix, I could actually apply the triangle wave texture to the other triangle wave texture. So I could open up this triangle wave texture, I could remove my phone case, and I could just apply the triangle wave to the body. So it doesn't matter what, if there's already a texture applied to that, I can just continue to apply a texture to a texture. All right, I'm going to increase my wave spacing a little bit just so you can see that a little bit better. Nice. And so the very last thing I'm going to show you to create, to basically turn this into something that's, I think, very visually dynamic, and also maybe a bit more functionally dynamic too, is to apply, basically increase the wave spacing in this area where you may have the most amount of contact from where you're holding the phone case, and have it be much smaller in these areas. So what I'm going to do is basically the variable that we have at our disposal is the wave spacing. So I can make that a scalar field as well. And I'm just going to add a point variable. And let's see, 0, 0, 0, see where we're at here. Kind of bring this up a little bit. Bring it down. Cool. So we have this point, and I can add this point here to our scalar field. And I want this to be a pretty large, I want this to have a pretty large impact on the wave spacing. So I can say anywhere from 0 to maybe 75 millimeters. I want the wave spacing, the closer it is to this point, to be maybe 4 millimeter. And as we move away, I want it to be 1 millimeter. So I'm going to turn this into a variable. I'm going to call this my wave spacing modifier. And I'm going to drag and drop. I'm going to replace my wave spacing constant values with this wave spacing scalar field. Nice. Okay. So the wave gets a little bit small, a little bit too small in these areas. I'm going to increase this to 2. Maybe I'll increase this to 5. Nice. That looks really good. Yeah, you can see the wave height is much taller in this area. It tapers down to nothing towards the edge of the case and around the camera edge. And yeah, the wave spacing gets a lot smaller in spacing and height around the edge. So I'm going to jump over to the final file that we have here. Yeah, so that's about it. Yeah, so just a recap of what we learned. We learned how to apply a texture to an object using some simple out-of-the-box blocks that we provide in the Architect and Materials toolkit. I showed you how to modify the features of a texture using some simple geometry, whether it's a point or a feature of the actual consumer product itself. I showed you how to blend between different texture types using the powerful mix block. And then I showed you how you can basically add a texture to a texture and layer those textures up using either Boolean Union or just continually inputting a textured object to a texture block. Yeah, I'll be answering some questions, but thank you for tuning in. I will definitely be doing another texturing nTop live in the future. So thank you, everybody.